Hello everyone. Um, Today I'll be showing you how to deploy Node.js or like ExpressJS web applications. So here you see the dummy bank app that you're all familiar with. Um, s- I can also see that it's currently running on localhost, so that means it's running on my machine, and anyone else cannot access the dummy bank aside from just me. Also in this other tab, see that I have a domain called demouser.webeng.live. So you have your own domains like this. Just replace demo user with your GitLab username. So currently it has nothing in it. It might be different in your cases if you've deployed your personal websites before. What you will see here is your personal website, the static version of them, not the one running Express. So what we'll do now is to get this dummy bank application, which is an ExpressJS application, to run under demouser.webeng.live. So let's get started. Just gonna stop this one. Okay, never mind. I'm just gonna use the file upload once. To begin, all first thing we need to do is to connect to the server. So before, the way you deployed your files before is via FTP, or file transfer protocol. So that's when you were using FileZilla to upload the files, and that automatically gets served under your domain names. Um, Here is a different approach, so we are directly logging into the server. So to log into the server, just run SSH, then your username, your GitLab username, and at webeng.live, or like at demouser.webeng.live. So and then press enter. It will ask you if you want to verify the authenticity of this host. Just type yes, and then it will ask you for your password. So the credentials here, like demo user, the username, the host, which is demouser.webeng.live, and the password are the same credentials that you used in FileZilla. So in this case, the demo user will equivalent of that will be your GitLab username. Demo user.webeng, inside of demo user.webeng.live, use your own domain for that you're using your website, and for your passwords, it's your password to FileZilla, so which is your student number. So type your password. If you type it correctly, you see this welcome message from Ubuntu. So now you are currently logged into the Ubuntu server. So just a few things to note: the user replace with your GitLab username, and password is your student number, so that you don't get confused why you can't log in. So now I am currently inside the server. So if I run ls, there's nothing here, which is true because nothing is being shown in the server. So now that we're inside the server, the next step in deploying our Express application is to get a copy of our source code into the server. So you can do that anyway, in whichever way you want, but my preferred way is via Git. So since we already have our repo of our Web Express application in GitLab, what I would do is just clone that repository inside the server. So git clone dummy bank. So you don't have to use dummy bank. You can clone your personal websites if you already have them running in Express, and it will ask me for a password. This is now my password to our GitLab. So authentication failed. Oops, that's because I used the wrong password. So I've now found this. So note that if you are using the dummy bank, replace my username with your GitLab username so that you are able to clone the dummy bank repository. So now have a dummy bank, refresh our server. Dummy bank is there, we can view its files, but that's not what we want. What we want to see is not the files of the dummy bank source code, but instead the running application. So now that we've got a copy of our dummy bank application over to the server, all we need to do is simply run it like how we would do it in our local host. So before we do that, let's install the dependencies first. So this will take a while, so it gives me time to explain several stuff. So when you get your own server, things like Git or Node.js or whatever utilities that you need are most likely not going to be installed by default. So you'll have to install them by yourself. So in our case, I've already pre-installed all of them for you. So when you log into the server, you already have Git and Node.js and other things installed. But just a note, when you have your own server, don't be shocked that you don't have Git or whatever other tools that you're expecting to use. So don't forget to install them separately. Also, since this is just an Ubuntu server, usually the way for installing these tools like Git and Node are just going to be the same with how you would install them in an Ubuntu desktop if you're using one. So let's just wait for a little bit for installing dependencies to finish. Why are you stuck? Hello. Let's just browse a little. Let's close. It seems to get stuck in extracting SQL SLR. Okay, now it's continuing. So just a note again, this is why when you install no npm dependencies, it's important to add the --save flag. What it does is it adds your dependencies to your package.json so that later on when you're deploying or when you share it with other members of your project, you don't have to individually install each dependencies again, since all dependencies are now inside package.json. All you have to do now is run npm install instead of installing each dependencies one by one. So with the dependencies installed inside Node modules, what we can do now is just run the server. So in our local development setup, we used to do node mount, but then since this is already the production or like the live server, we don't need the automatic restart of our server, so we just run it normally with node. And then our server file, which is index.js. So that's because port 3000 is already being used. So let me just modify the port here quickly. So So instead of 4000, I'd like to use 3001. So let's try it again. Okay, forgot to change the logs. I'll also change this to 3001. So that's one thing to note when deploying Express applications, especially if you're deploying multiple applications into one server. Like for in this case, let's say this is a general purpose server for me. I run different web applications here. Common minor problem you might run into is the port numbers, because yeah, only one application can run in that port number. So make sure that you don't have a clash of port numbers in your applications. So let's try our server again. So my dummy bank's Express server is now running at port 3000 on our remote server. So we can now access it at user.webeng.live port 3001. So here we are seeing the dummy bank being deployed in the server. So that's one. Problem with our current setup here is we're running the server like this. So if I request, like do anything, I can only do that as long as the server is running. So let's say, for example, I'm already done for the day, I want to go home, play some games already. So what I will do is log out from the server. So I will have to stop it, and then let's say disconnect from the server. What it will do is it will stop our running Express application. So that's not what we want. What we want is for the Express, for the dummy bank Express application to keep running even though I'm already disconnected from the server. So we can achieve that by running our server in the background, and there are npm packages to do that. So one very common one is all forever. So from the docs, forever as a simple tool that ensures that a given script runs continuously or like and in the background. So yeah, that's why it's called forever. So we install forever globally. So that's what the -g flag is for. After installing forever globally, you'll then get a forever command in your command line. So here are all the options you can do with forever. You might want to read through those, but let's just get started with forever right away. So to run a script forever, so in our case, we want to run index.js forever or like continuously in the background. To do that, you need to run forever start and then the name of the script that you want to run. So in our case, for index.js, so it's forever start index.js. So hitting enter, you see that forever says it's not processing file forever. So to see all running scripts, you can run forever list. So in here, I see that there's already one that I'm running before, and in our case this is the second one. Let me just stop the first one. So stop forever running scripts, you just need forever stop and then the index. So I believe this is the first one. Forever stop 0, it will stop the script at index 0. So if you run forever list again, it's just the one that we have left. So our script is now running forever. You see that we don't see the logs, or like we can still use the terminal to run other commands, and at the same time our dummy bank is now running at our domain colon 3001, which is a port number that we configure it to run in. So even though I disconnect from the server, or like shut down my computer and go away, our dummy bank application, which is now running forever or continuously, can then be still accessible by the people. So let me just connect one. So that's how we get an Node.js script to run continuously. And one annoying thing here is the port number. So if you don't mind that, that's fine, but it's very unusual to see port numbers in like live applications. So our next goal would be removing this one. Instead of accessing the dummy bank application via port 3001, we want it to be via port 80. So instead of seeing this list of files, we want to see the actual dummy bank application running here when we don't specify a port number. So that's actually by default port 80 because it's running HTTP. So to configure our server to serve the dummy application, to serve the dummy bank application port 80, we need to configure our Nginx configuration. So if you remember from before, Nginx is this reverse proxy server application which actually receives all incoming HTTP requests, and based on some properties of that request, route that traffic to the right applications. So let's see our Express configurations. So in etc slash nginx sites enabled, you see all different configurations of Nginx. So I actually have one config file for each one of your personal websites, and in my case I'll be using demo user.webeng.live. So edit that. So another thing to note when you're on a live server is it's a purely terminal based interface, so you don't get to open files in your favorite text editor. So there are ways to do that, but it's a lot faster if you do it via the terminal. So in our case, if you want to edit files, you have to use terminal based text editing tools like V or Nano or whatever other tools. So the V. So this is the Nginx config file for the demo user.webeng.live. So you see that it's listening at port 80 and the server name is demo user.webeng.live. So what Nginx will do is it will listen at port 80, and then whenever an HTTP request arrives at port 80, it will check the server name. So if the server name doesn't match, then Nginx won't use this config. If it does, like for example, if you visit demo user.webeng.live, which matches with the server name value, and that tells Nginx to use this config file. So currently what it is doing is it's just serving the contents of my home directory. So that's why we see this list of files and like everything. So instead of serving my home directory, I want it instead to serve my Express application that is running on port 3001. So to tell Express to do that, we use the proxy pass directive. So I will tell Express to act as a proxy and just forward all requests that it receives to forward all the requests that it receives to localhost on 3001. So whenever ExpressJS receives an incoming HTTP connection at port 80 coming from demo user.webeng.live, it will forward that HTTP request to whatever application is running on port 3001, and we know what that application is. It's our ExpressJS application for the dummy bank. So we save it. If you don't know how to save in Vim, just press escape to exit insert mode, press colon to trigger command mode, then WQ. So W will write the changes to the file and Q will quit. So now that we've updated the contents of my Nginx config, so if you're updating your own config, make sure to update the correct file. So all of them are done now, pre-configured to serve your individual home directories. Don't change other people's files. So every time you change an Nginx config, you always need to restart Nginx for the changes to be applied. So to do that, you need to run sudo service Nginx restart. So yeah, it's done so fast. The Nginx daemon has already been restarted. The new changes has been loaded and applied and used. Now let's see back in our server, our browser I mean. So now we won't specify a port, so let's start with a port first. So we're seeing the dummy bank, but if you don't specify port, which by default it will use port 80, see that the dummy bank application is still being served even though we didn't specify the port here. That's because Nginx is already receiving all that request and forwarding it to port 3001, which is our dummy bank application. So that's basically it on deploying generally Node.js applications. First step would be to log into the server via SSH, and then get a copy of your source code to the server. In our case, we used Git to clone our repository, and then we just need to run the server, but not just the usual way of running the server. We need to run it continuously in the background. So to achieve that, we're using forever, which runs scripts continuously forever in the background. And then to get rid of port numbers in your applications, you need to configure Nginx to accept incoming requests at port 80 and then forward those requests to the right application. So Nginx is not the only server who can do that. Other popular options are like Apache and others that I'm not familiar with, but in our case we're just using Express. So now got our dummy bank application running on the server. So note that we didn't configure any database yet. When you're deploying an application, especially in your own server, you have to configure that yourself. So additional thing you can do is set up your database. Okay, don't even have a user, so set up your database and like configure your application to use your database in your server. So all those extra stuff. So basically what you need to do is everything that you need to do in your local development setup, like installing your database, installing your app dependencies. You also need to do that in your server so that your Express application have the right dependencies that it needs, like database connection or everything. So in here we're skipping the setting up of the database part because it's just the same with setting up in local. And important thing is we have our dummy bank application running on the server at this domain without the extra ports. So that's it for deploying Node.js applications. Thanks.